It is a dark, dark day for this channel. Hello and welcome to another episode of Not So Super Movie Reviews. Today we're going to be doing the movie Captain Marvel. Now, I know what you're thinking. Captain Marvel's not a bad movie, dude. And while, spoiler alert, I happen to agree with you, it turns out that your average fan, not so much. This movie had a critic score of 78% and a user review score of 48%. This was devastating news for me because when I created this channel, I created an Excel spreadsheet of every superhero movie that I could find out existed. And I put the Rotten Tomato scores for everything, and then I took out anything that was above 65% for either the critic or the user score. Now, when I did this, the Captain Marvel movie hadn't actually come out on DVD or on Netflix yet, or Disney Plus, and at the time, it did not have a score that would be considered for my channel. I don't remember what the score was at the time, but I can pretty much guarantee you that it wasn't 48% and that it was above 65%. So we're going to kind of get into what might have happened here with your average fan slash moviegoer. A special thanks to my good friend and a huge fan of the channel, Michael Stillings, for pointing out this devastating news that I now have to do an MCU movie. He was very pleased with himself being a DC fan and knowing that I'm a huge Marvel fan to have found out that there is a movie in the MCU. Now, you may be thinking, what about Thor the Dark World? Thor the Dark World has a critic score of 66%, so we almost got there. So without further ado, let's get into my honest review of this movie. First, let's talk about what works about this movie, and the first thing that comes to mind is just the what I like to call the MCU essential ingredients. There are, from my observation, three things that every MCU movie has, and is part of the success. The first thing that every MCU movie has is top-notch special effects. And Captain Marvel is obviously no exception. In fact, it's a great example of what you would consider to be very good special effects. You know, MCU does not spare any pennies when they make these movies. Captain Marvel is proof of that. The second thing that every MCU movie has is over-the-top action. And again, Captain Marvel, no exception. There's tons of action scenes, tons of good action scenes in this movie. And the last thing that every MCU has, to varying degrees, is bits of comedy. And again, this movie does that. There are plenty of little humorous moments sprinkled throughout this movie. The second thing that I liked about this movie is that it's a fresh take on an MCU origin story. A lot of people, when they saw this movie, they said, oh, okay, another origin story. But I think that's not necessarily the fault of Captain Marvel as a movie, but just the fact that we're maybe a little bit fatigued with having all of these origin stories. Coming back and rewatching it, it actually does things a lot differently than most of the other origin stories in the MCU. There's a few things that a lot of the MCU origin stories do. First thing is that in this movie, the villain is not just a stronger version of the hero. There's a lot of MCU movies that are culprits of this very thing, that the villain is just an evil version of the hero, but with stronger powers. Captain Marvel, the antagonist of this movie is the Skrulls, but then it actually flips that on its head about halfway through the movie, and the antagonist completely changes. And the antagonist is not just Captain Marvel, but stronger. In fact, it's almost the entire Kree race and the Supreme Intelligence. It becomes the antagonist. And I thought that made for a very dynamic experience compared to some of the other movies. Another common trope is that you see the hero get their powers, usually a good bit into the movie, and then come to terms with their powers, and then come to terms with being a hero. Captain Marvel does kind of do that, but in a different way, in sort of a Memento sort of way, which is that she's getting these flashbacks of her past, of who she really already is, and already was. She's learning about her powers, but she had them from the beginning, and they were being suppressed. Another thing that a lot of superhero movies have is the older, wiser guide, somebody to mentor them through the story that acts as sort of a Sherpa to their superpowers. Really, in this movie, it's the opposite. Captain Marvel has people suppressing her powers, teaching her how to be less than herself. And she has to fight against that through her. Now, she has some strong examples. Nick Fury in this movie is kind of showing her the importance of going with your gut. So you could argue that he kind of plays that role in this movie, but for the most part, he's more of a sidekick, or kind of taking place of the love interest, which is the fourth thing, which is most of these origin stories have some kind of love interest. This movie had no need for it, and it didn't bother with it. I think it would have bogged down the movie. Now, I'm not saying that having a love story is a bad thing. There's plenty of superhero movies that benefit from that. This movie didn't need it. It didn't do it. Instead, you kind of get this budding friendship between Nick Fury and Captain Marvel, and I thought that that worked really effectively. The third thing that I thought worked about this movie, may sound a little controversial, and I may not be qualified to speak about women's rights and feminist messages. Captain Marvel, the point of Captain Marvel is also to have a pro-female, women's rights. But here we go. A lot of people thought that this movie was laying it on too thick with the feminist messages.
Nice scuba suit. You lighten up, honey, huh? Got a smile for me?
But from my mind, not only is there something from this message that everyone can take away, but there's the issues that Captain Marvel is dealing with in this movie are issues that I've seen the women in my life deal with. The concept of being held back or told what to do or put in your place, or having these expectations about what you're supposed to be, and learning how, Captain Marvel throughout this movie is learning to trust her gut and to be confident in her own skin, and also to kind of push back against authority that might be suppressing her in ways that are inappropriate, and, that she has every right to kind of push back against. And personally, I think that's, again, a message that everyone can take away, but especially from the perspective of a feminist message, I thought that that was just a lot deeper than just your typical, what you would expect from Hollywood, which is just oh, she's a girl superhero, look at her go, she can do the things men do. Instead, I thought they opted for an actually powerful, useful message in this movie, and I thought they did a pretty good job of it. I said this in my Catwoman video as well, but if I had a daughter, I would want her to look up to Captain Marvel as a character, and I would want her to take away these themes. So what didn't work about this movie? The first thing that I gotta bring up is the acting/casting of Brie Larson. Sort of. I really don't hate it completely, but her acting is a weak point in this movie. The times where she's not making sarcastic quips, or delivering a punch, or a punchline, those are the times that it's a little bit dry and a little bit passive at times. And there's a lot of scenes in this movie where Captain Marvel just feels like she's in them, but not really an active part of them. And when you have some really good acting talent from pretty much all your other supporting characters and villains, it just becomes pretty noticeable. I would say that it's less noticeable in this movie than it is in Infinity War and the end credit scene, which were actually shot before this movie. As far as casting Brie Larson, I'm somebody who I think that any actor, for the most part, can tackle any role if they take it seriously. And you can't really say that she didn't take it seriously, because she did train very hard. I mean, most of us have probably seen the video of her pushing a Jeep.
Go, dig, 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 dig. We got 20 seconds left. You can do it. You can do it. 1 foot, just like that. Come on, come on, come on.
But I just felt that compared to the top tier casting from the rest of the MCU, I didn't feel like Brie Larson was quite on point as Captain Marvel, especially Captain Marvel being one of the few characters that I know from the comics, not from other media like movies and TV shows and cartoons and things. That about wraps up what I didn't like about this movie. You know, it's a typical MCU movie. It's safe, but it's solid. So yeah, let's get to who I agree with, the critics, the users, or do I have my own score? Let's cut right to the chase. I obviously agree with the critics. This wasn't the best movie in the world, but it definitely deserves a passing grade. It's entertaining, it's rewatchable, and I will rewatch it again. It does not belong, in my mind, in the pantheon of bad superhero movies. So why the disparity? Why is there a 30% difference in this movie? All you have to do to find that out is to search Brie Larson on YouTube. I guarantee you that a handful of the results on the first page are going to be YouTube videos about people talking trash about Brie Larson, you know, about how they hate Brie Larson or why Brie Larson sucks. And that's because, from what I can tell, there were 2 comments she made in the press tours for Infinity War and Captain Marvel. You know, it started with her making a comment to Chris Hemsworth about how, like, I do all my own stunts. I thought everybody did.
So you don't do...
I do all my
This is the
stunts.
thing. I did my stunts because I thought that that's what everyone did, and then...
Tom Cruise over here?
No, I want to be the first me, not the next Tom Cruise. Thank you very much.
Wow.
And that was taken as this really, like, terrible thing to say and so rude. And in the video, Don Cheadle gives her, like, a look. Maybe she's being sarcastic. Maybe she was being rude. I don't think it's really that huge of a deal. You know, she came out after that and said, I don't care what white guys think. Which, I agree. Who cares what white guys think? But seriously, it feels like after those things kind of came out that the internet just sort of took to the Rotten Tomatoes page to trash this movie and said, yeah, that'll get her. Which, to me, is just so... It shows that the fans can be very petty and quite frankly stupid. I mean, to give a movie a bad score because you didn't like something one of the actors said is kind of like not eating ice cream because you don't like the way cow farts smell. I mean, it's ridiculous. This movie is the culmination of the effort of just so many people, and to give it a bad score because of something that was said off screen, because you didn't like the actress that played them. Now, if she had done something like seriously bad, like beaten her husband or sexually assaulted someone, I would totally get it. But in this case, I just think the fans are being petty. And, you know, as a reviewer, it's my job to just watch this movie and say, what do I think about this movie? And this movie was good. Alright guys, that about wraps it up for today's video. Thank you for watching another video. If you liked it, click the like button. You can subscribe for more of the same content. If you'd like to see me do a specific bad superhero movie, let me know down in the comments, and we'll see you next time.
Like, not have a panic attack. Oh, Chris, that's really nice.
That's sweet.
I'm still stronger than you, though.
You're not, though.